Okay, everyone, please take your seats. We're about to get started. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome to the Pretty Good Policy PGP for Crypto meeting on a gorgeous spring DC morning. I'm Paul Brigner, the organizer of the PGP initiative and vice president of strategic alliances at Electric Coin Company, the creators and developers of Zcash. We're here to share information, build a stronger crypto policy community, and drive forward with pretty good policy for crypto. Thank you for being a part of this PGP for crypto community, as well as those who are online today joining us. I want to thank our sponsors and supporters, including Coinbase, the Blockchain Association, Electric Coin Company, and for this beautiful venue, which is made possible by VanEck Digital Assets Initiative, that's VITA for short, at the University of Southern California. I also want to thank Mike Orcutt and the very, very talented team of journalists at Project Glitch. They partner with us to bring curated content to these meetings. Today, the Glitch discussion is focused on an issue that I believe is existential for the blockchain and crypto industry. The topic is hardening the industry's cybersecurity capability, as well as our ability to mitigate vulnerabilities and exploits that are regularly launched by extremely sophisticated attackers, sometimes at the nation-state level. So thank you, Mike and Project Glitch, for your contribution today to raise this critical issue to the PGP community. To ensure you are all notified of future meetings, please subscribe to our Luma event page at lu.ma/PGP for crypto, where you can see the full calendar of PGP events for the rest of the year. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@PGP for crypto. Okay, let's proceed to our outstanding program today. Our first lightning talk speaker is Eric Chung. We are very privileged to have Eric here. He is normally at main campus at USC in Los Angeles, so he's a long way from home, but he picked a great time to come to DC, and I just want him to say a few words about all that he's up to and welcome you to this beautiful venue.
Morning, everyone. My name is Eric Chunk, and I'm the Managing Director for USC Marshall Van Eyck Digital Assets Initiative. You may have seen me in October when I did make my first showing here at Capitol Campus. And we've been working with Paul for the last year to make sure that we are staying involved in the conversation that's happening in DC, and also make use of this beautiful campus here. So thank you all for coming. And today I'll just quickly give an overview of what we've been up to, and also just kind of the higher level vision of the USC Marshall Van Eyck Digital Assets Initiative, or VEDA. I'm going to say VEDA from now on, okay? So everyone knows what I'm talking about. But for VEDA, so we were supported by the firm Van Eyck. We received a gift a couple of years ago to create a coordination engine and fuel for digital asset innovation on campus. And it is housed in the USC Marshall School of Business. And our primary activities revolve around curriculum, research, and community building. So on the curriculum front, we are now currently at 15 courses. I myself am also a faculty at USC. I've been teaching for the last 7 years now in the engineering department. And my North Star there has been and will continue to be very simple, a 4-year undergraduate program around digital assets and blockchain. So we plan to do this jointly with the engineering school, 70% business, 30% engineering, where students will be able to, upskill from zero all the way to being able to be a contributing, industry expert by the time that they finish school. And not just, the theoretical things. USC has always excelled when it comes to the application side of things. So we want to harness the entrepreneurial energy and make sure that they're also be able to exit the university walls with applicable skills that they could directly go and build the next big, Coinbase or electric coin company. So that's the curriculum front. On the research side, we're actually very excited that since I stepped up here last in October, we have launched our research grants program, and we have 4 grantees. Can't say too much about it yet until we make a public announcement, but super excited to put some dollars to work and start actively funding research on campus. We do look forward to potentially opening it up to the larger community, so we are definitely open to partnering with different organizations and companies that might want to do co-sponsored research. So that's been something that's, very exciting on campus and will continue to ramp up throughout the school year. And finally, on the community and event side, events like this is great for us to foster, a large network of enthusiasts and experts that are, really pushing the boundaries forward. On campus, we have our annual blockchain conference, which just happened last month. Paul was actually a speaker at our conference. And, in previous years, we've had Anatoly from Solana, Chris Dixon from A16Z, Jan Van Eyck from Van Eyck come out and speak. So that's something that we do as our flagship event at the main campus. And in October, we also plan to have our annual hackathon with our fall event in LA. So if you are in town, please feel free to come out and attend. But beyond that, just wanted to say that very excited every time I come to DC. People kind of have this vision of DC being kind of like a bit slower when it comes to things that are happening on the crypto front. But I mean, we all know that is not true, right? That's not the case. The fact that this room is packed and there's been a lot of activity, especially in the last 3 months, happening around crypto policy that we're very excited to support. So please feel free to come out and reach out, introduce yourself to me, and see if there are any ways that the university can help support whatever you're doing, whether that is on the curriculum side or on the research side. So thank you for having me.
That's just kind of mind-blowing to me to think that we're going to have a degree program for blockchain engineering. That is fantastic. Thanks for all your work, Eric, and for supporting this initiative. Our next up is Ron Hammond, Senior Director of Government Relations at Blockchain Association. Ron has been here multiple times giving us the latest on what's happening on the Hill, where he spends almost all of his days. But today he's not, so because he's not in a suit. He's typically in a suit. So you can tell us about that, Ron. What's going on today?
Of course. Hey, everyone. Here in the flesh, Ron Hammond with the Blockchain Association. So really good to see a lot of familiar faces here. Obviously not in a suit today because Congress is in recess and my suits are dry cleaning right now. So I appreciate everyone coming by. It's really exciting. There's a lot happening on Capitol Hill. So let's just quickly dive into kind of where the state of play is right now. So we have first off, we got our first crypto bill signed into law very, very recently. It was the IRS broker rule that dated back to the infrastructure bill of 2021. It's been a long, long fight. So to see that culminated into a bipartisan vote of 2/3 of Congress supporting this and getting to the president's desk on a CRA, let alone a CRA of a treasury rule, is pretty groundbreaking on a number of fronts. So it's really exciting to see that huge base of support, because we're going to need it for the next round, which is going to be stablecoins. We have the Stable Act in the House that passed the committee. It's currently waiting for a House vote. We have the Genius Act that's waiting for a vote in the Senate, on the Senate floor. Timing for those can be pretty soon, or it could be a little bit longer. It really depends on a lot of the macro stuff that's happening right now in DC. We're going to have a lot of discussions on reconciliation, the budget for the next couple of weeks in Congress and in May. And so there's a chance that this really does push off those stablecoin bills to maybe more of a June timeframe, but they're still figuring out the schedule right now, it seems. So we could see stablecoins, and we probably will see a move likely mid to late May. But what's going to have to happen is once the House votes on their version, the Stable Act, and the Senate votes on their version, the Genius Act, they are different. So they're going to have to combine those two bills together, vote on it again, which will be the Stable Genius Act. Now, there's been a lot of calls about maybe doing a one bill approach because market structure is just right behind it. We already had a couple of hearings happening in the House. And it seems like we're going to get a draft pretty soon. It could be anywhere from potentially as early as next week we might see something to maybe end of May we'll maybe see something. There's a lot of, I'm talking to various folks here, and it's still unclear when they're going to be ready for prime time, but they're close. So while the stablecoin bill, we're waiting for those time to have a vote on it on the floor. In the meantime, the committee is going to be working on market structure. So that's a big bill that everyone wants to talk about. Securities laws, commodities law, where's the SEC jurisdiction end, where does the CFTC jurisdiction begin? What does custody rules look like? All these huge things are huge questions that a lot of folks have. The only thing that we really know solidly is that it's going to be different than FIT 21, but it's going to be subject for a lot more hearings and a lot more debate. So get really excited, because it's going to be really dense in the weed topics when we come to market structure. And again, likely May and June we'll really see that ramp up. And so the upside is that we have a lot of bills that are moving forward, and it does have the impetus of the president really encouraging this to happen. He wants a bill signed to his desk before August 1st. And so would that be market structure? It's hard to see at this stage. However, there is the potential they could get this done in time. Stablecoins seem like the more likely candidate. And again, there have been some articles out there saying, maybe we should just do one big bill and have everything, including market structure and stablecoins in there. I'm sure that's one of the tactics, but we do have another year and a half of this Congress, so we do have time if we don't get to it right now immediately. So overall, it's really, really exciting, at least on the congressional front, but expect a lot more action in the time, and we're going to be waiting, hopefully, for floor time to free up to get a lot of these necessary bills done. So stand by. It's going to get really busy really soon. On the other end, though, let's look at the agencies. The SEC is having more roundtables this week. They're going to have theirs on custody, and that's really exciting. We're seeing a lot of conversations about that, and be really important, especially for the legislation meeting in the works right now. Additionally, on top of that, we had the CFTC came out with some request for information. That was more on perpetual trading. That happened on Monday, but the turnaround time is 1 month, and so it's a very kind of a unique topic within crypto, especially for more firms on the trading side of things and 24-hour trading. And so I would look to the CFTC getting a lot more involved here and really, more put in your face to name here when it goes to engaging the CFTC, because a lot of folks think about the SEC in Congress, but we don't really think about the CFTC, and that's going to be really crucial, especially with this market structure bill coming along. And then overall, besides that, we do have a couple more potential reports coming out from the administration. They do have a timeline that usually ends, I believe it's the last week of July is when their last report is technically due by. And then that's when we're going to probably see not the end of the task force effort, at least within the White House, but we'll see probably the end of their reports, and then more focusing on moving the last remaining bills through Congress. And they've been doing a really, really good job, in my opinion, at least bringing that coordinating effort, because there's so many players, as we all know, through the agencies in Congress. But overall, it's all really positive. It's going to get really, really busy, but that's what we're here for, the Blockchain Association. So if you have any questions on any of this stuff, I'm always happy to chat. And you can always ping me on Twitter at Ron W. Hammond or at ron@theblockchainassociation.org, and I'm always happy to chat. So thanks, guys. Just get ready for a lot of fun soon.
It's just impossible to overemphasize how important this time is in crypto and all the work that Ron and the team at Blockchain Association are doing. We're literally laying the foundation for the entire industry, something that we've worked so hard to get to this point to be able to do. So, wow, keep up the good work, Ron. That CFTC RFI that he mentioned, I think that's also very important. I don't know if any of you are too familiar with these perpetuity contracts, but it's my understanding that that's where the vast majority of global cryptocurrency trading occurs, and it does not happen here because we don't allow perpetuities trading in our markets. So hopefully there will be progress made on that so we can bring back some of that here to the US. All right, next up, good friend Tony Douglas, co-founder, director of strategy and operations at the Decentralization Research Center. I just love this industry because there's so many really good organizations, and the DRC is just one of the best. And you know, he and his co-founder Connor, they're just fantastic. And come tell us about DRC and what you're up to, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the kind words, Paul. Really appreciate you all having me. I love intimate settings. I can tell if people aren't paying attention, maybe you can call people out. But yeah, so as Paul mentioned, I'm the co-founder of the Decentralization Research Center. I'm assuming this moves the slides.
It might. Give it I enjoy. There you go. Good.
Okay, great. So no surprise, I'm here to talk about general decentralization, why it matters, why defining it properly matters in legislation, and why there should be more coordination within the crypto industry in that effort in market structure. So just a little bit of background on us. You know, I'm not going to read this verbatim, but we're a nonprofit think tank that focuses on research, education, and advocacy in support of the decentralization of emerging technologies. Our history goes back 4 years now, while I was at Stanford Business School and leading the blockchain club there. And what we realized at the time was there were an incredible group of academics and builders and leaders of foundations in the space that were all solving similar problems, but doing it in their own little silos. So really what we wanted to do more than anything was bring those people together, bring the artifacts that they were creating aggregated in one place, which we did on our website, and just really, again, have more coordination amongst a group of distributed actors that are not always the most coordinated. This is a little bit of background on myself. I'm obviously, not going to talk about my background, but I will say what is relevant. Largely in my career and my research, what I've focused on primarily is how to account for the process, people, and technology change required to adopt emerging technology. And, I'll talk about why that's relevant here in market structure in a second. We also have a team of, I don't know at this point, maybe 40 fellows that help us with our research, and more recently have helped us with our advocacy efforts on the Hill. So decentralization, again, not going to read this slide. I can share these if people are interested. And this is also meant for an audience that is not familiar with the topic at all. These are all very nuanced things. But what's being outlined here is that decentralization exists on a spectrum, right? There isn't like either you are centralized or decentralized. You can be somewhere, again, on this spectrum. And really it comes down to a couple of dimensions, the technical, economic, and governance dimensions of a particular blockchain. Just a little backstory as I get into market structure and the decentralization test. For 3.5 years, so up until June last year, we just focused on research and education, which sort of begs the question, why advocacy? At the time, market structure was being discussed, and we were quite concerned that the decentralization test was too permissive. It seemed to have been crafted by very educated folks generally, but maybe not people that are very nuanced or deep in the topic of decentralization and blockchains. And what's the problem with it being too permissive? Well, it allows for regulatory arbitrage. People that what this slide is not trying to say is make some value judgment on centralized versus decentralized. But what it is problematic is if you are centralized and you espouse that you are decentralized, right? In fact, your chain is controlled by a few people, but you're telling consumers or different participants in that network that it isn't controlled, right? That it's controlled by a broader group of people. So we think that there was that risk in the sort of original drafting of the decentralization test. And also, in our view, it didn't properly incentivize decentralization. So if, I helped start the Stanford Blockchain Accelerator, and there are a lot of students I talk to that are thinking about building things like this, right? If they're concerned that once they achieve some level of decentralization that their liability won't be limited, right? There's some ongoing liability that will persist in their lives. Obviously, that's a really poor incentive for decentralization. Also, if there aren't adequate relief from disclosure requirements, again, another bad incentive for decentralization. So again, back in June, we decided, okay, we should bring together this coalition of fellows that I had on the last slide and bring more of the voice of those folks to the Hill. To oversimplify a very difficult topic, what we've published is a focus on control when we talk about decentralization and principles that map to control. These are recommendations that we've made for a decentralization test. 8 principles that we think are incredibly important to consider yourself properly decentralized. We have a report that's on our website on our research tab, which I would encourage, and actually is the primary reason I'm here, people to read and provide feedback. We don't think that this is necessarily 100% correct. We're actually releasing a V2 on Friday or Monday of next week. But what we do want is to start a discussion and invite feedback, and again, get coordination from a broader group of people that are very deep in this topic but don't have a voice on the Hill. So, I touched on these a little bit, but what are the consequences of policy failing to adequately test for decentralization? Again, market participants not knowing the risks could be misled, right? Like if we, for example, don't have a test, Miles Jennings from A16Z spoke at our event 2 weeks ago and made this example. If we can't distinguish between FTT or Luna and Ethereum, we're really doing this industry a disservice and consumers a disservice. And as we all well know, this industry has an incredible group. Like, I cannot speak highly of the innovators in this space, but there are also opportunists, right? So if we have legislation that can be exploited, we're going to find ourselves in any number of future blowups and different administrations that have their political interests, and there's very likely to be backlash, right? If we don't adequately account for that right now. And I already touched on this, but I'll ultimately just wrap up by saying, in market structure, without getting into the weeds, this test is really defining the difference between digital assets as a commodity and a security, which has a ton of legal implications. And it really, really matters that we get this right. And lastly, I'll say that we bring more voices than just a few for-profit companies who are also doing great work. I'm not trying to disparage that, but they can't be the only voice in the room on the Hill. So it matters that there's more input from the broader industry here. This report on the left is the report that I was referencing that talk about the criteria in more detail, talk more detail why this matters. And again, we're releasing a V2 next week. Would love feedback from this group. Thank you for having me.
If there were ever a moment for an organization, it seems like it's a moment for yours. Decentralization is the key point of market structure, and you guys have it in your title. It's all that you're about. So you're ready to step up, and I'm glad to see that you are. Thank you. Okay, next online, we're going to have Leah Holland from the Fight for the Future. I don't know if you guys are aware of Fight for the Future. It's kind of a grassroots organization. They do a lot of campaigns, very effective ones, in fact. And I think she's been their campaign and communications director for quite some time. So from the person that makes all the things happen, go ahead, Leah.
Hi, Paul. It's so great to see your face. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. As Paul said, I'm Leah Holland, campaigns and comms director, Fight for the Future. My outfit is a queer women and artists-led pro-privacy and anti-censorship national organization. We've been a leader for a long time in pushing back against misguided policies that seek to regulate crypto in ways that conflict with free expression and privacy. And we're maybe best known in these circles for our hashtag Don't Kill Crypto campaign in 2021 that drove over 40,000 calls to policymakers and elevated DeFi to the national stage for the first time. Or for our ensuing work to defend the right to code open source, privacy-preserving technology against Democrats' inclinations to regulate the space out of the country. Our work builds bridges, expands opportunities for advocacy and strategizing on policy, and it's key to fostering a climate where human rights-centered crypto regulation can take priority. So I'm here today to tell groups like this one that while the Trump administration's support for crypto may be a short-term boon for some players in the industry, it's further cementing the issue as a partisan one politically. And looking to the far horizon, we can see that today's climate will most definitely rally more knee-jerk opposition from progressive civil society and Democrats in Congress. By allowing crypto to become a victim of the culture war rather than staying true to its cypherpunk roots, it will suffer the long-term consequences when the pendulum inevitably swings back to the left. And because we want better tools for human rights, we're working to stave off these consequences so that open source and community-owned tools for resilience and safety can continue to be coded in the US for decades to come. To be totally frank about it, I'm here to point to a report that we put out recently and to encourage the crypto community to invest in the liberatory tech potential that we've faced huge headwinds to defend ever since 2021. We want private, uncensorable money that anyone can use. We want Signal for money, and more, we want it built for mutual aid groups first. And why should the crypto community do that? Because once the disaster relief funds and the abortion funds and the bail funds are all relying on privacy coins to serve their communities and keep their volunteers safe, Democrats won't have a leg to stand on in 4 years when they inevitably come for crypto. In fact, they might see its importance and not come for it at all. And now's the moment. Ruthless version. Tornado Cash's sanctions are dropped. 6050I is fixed. The Justice Department has basically just declared that it's going to bury its head in the sand when it comes to crypto. And now's the moment. Human rights version. There's never been a more urgent need for privacy-preserving fintech among marginalized communities. HHS has just spun up a tip line for gender-affirming care providers. Our disaster response systems are gutted. Healthcare is on the chopping block. Across the spectrum of the left, progressives are doubling and tripling down on mutual aid. They're all talking to each other, seeking the best and safest solutions to scale across hundreds of mutual aid organizations around the country. And this brings me to the report I mentioned that my organization commissioned. It's called Financial Confidentiality in the Age of Digital Surveillance. It explores potential traditional and Web3 solutions for the use case of an abortion fund to conduct their mutual aid activities. TLDR, all the options suck, but for different reasons. Traditional fintech is ridden with surveillance, inconvenient, and unworkable for the use case. Web3 fintech sucks because it's either not actually Web3 and has a bunch of Web2 trackers and stuff on top of the interface, or it's legit and it'd be amazing, except it's too high a tech barrier for entry. Mutual aid organizations are run by volunteers with varying degrees of tech literacy. The people they serve need something as easy to use and get support on as Venmo. You can find the report on the first page of fightforthefuture.org/news or drop me a line at leah@fightforthefuture.org, and I'm very happy to link or talk more with you. And so now, coming off of that report, the UC Berkeley Cybersecurity Clinic is working with mutual aid organizations to do a case study of features that would be ideal for the mutual aid market. And when they release it, we'll be promoting these needs as part of our ongoing rallying cry to demand Signal for Money, or Cash App with ZKP, a user-friendly private money app that breaks the connection between sender and recipient, so that every mutual aid fund's PayPal isn't an imprisonment list for the attorney generals of a state like Texas or Florida. But once we've got that wish list, where do we go? The truth is, the tech we need is yours to build, not ours. We are the left-coded, grassroots digital human rights organization that threw down for crypto when no one else would. we're telling you right now what we are going to need to do it again. And so I came here today to ask, who's going to build it for real? You can contact me at leah@fightforthefuture.org, and I'd love to hear from anybody who has thoughts on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah. Fantastic remarks. So much of what you said deeply resonates with me. I will say, though, that PGP is politically neutral. We're here for policy, pretty good policy, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. However, our speakers are definitely not neutral, and obviously Leah's not, and that's just fine. But what it points out to me is that no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, there are important things for you to be doing in crypto. There's reasons why this makes sense for everyone, and that's why I really wanted to do this gathering, is to bring all the voices together so that we can see that this is not just for one group or another. This is for everyone, and I particularly like making things suck a lot less. So thank you so much, Leah. Okay, let's move on. Our next speaker, some of you probably know that I actually had an early career in software development, so I really love all the tech in crypto, and one of the most interesting, highly technical things in crypto is making all the different chains talk to each other and doing that in a way that maintains decentralization. And that's where our next speaker is going to tell us about. It's called Interop Labs. Jason Roskovsky, Head of Legal and Policy for Interop. So Jason, you're up. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Hey, everybody. So I'm Jason Rosovsky. I'm the head of legal and policy at Interop Labs. At Interop, we build Axelar Network, which is an interoperability protocol. Axelar connects 74 networks and counting. So my presentation is going to be about decentralization and interoperability. There's been a lot of conversation about the benefits to businesses from decentralization. I'm going to present about the benefits to regulators and policymakers. Specifically, I'm going to present high-level concerns in financial oversight and how decentralized blockchain is suited to address those concerns. A lot of this is based on a paper that I wrote with my co-author, Lewis Cohen, who's a partner at Cahill Gordon, and there will be a link to it at the end of the presentation. Now, a quick disclaimer. These benefits are tied to decentralized blockchain networks. What we mean are base-level layer 1 protocols that maintain public permissionless blockchains operated by a decentralized and distributed set of tokenomic incentivized operators. A lot of what Tony had on his screen before, actually. So kicking off, the first concern is business continuity. Regulators and policymakers want to ensure that financial technology infrastructure has continuous operations that maintain suitable uptimes, especially in the case of disaster. While decentralized blockchain networks are resilient, there's no reliance on a single entity. There are many operators incentivized through tokenomics, which helps create redundancies. Permissionless networks means that anyone can pick up the slack if someone's failing. Next, risks arising from asset custody. Much of the traditional financial system is comprised of intermediaries that have access to customer assets. There are regulations that are in place to protect customer assets. Similarly, regulators and policymakers have a vested interest in not allowing fraud to proliferate. While blockchains are tamper-resistant, only users with private keys can move assets, and no intermediary has this ability unless it's granted to them by the user. Now, there are still concerns around private key security, but without the private key, there's no ability to transfer assets. Next, bankruptcy protection. So regulators and policymakers have a desire to protect customer assets from the bankruptcy of an intermediary. Well, decentralized blockchain networks have segregation, right? Tokens are only associated with specific addresses. They're never commingled. And so if an app developer goes bankrupt, that's separate and apart from the underlying ledger that actually tracks asset ownership. This is also tied to fraud mitigation. No commingling means that developers can't access underlying customer assets, which again are maintained by the underlying blockchain infrastructure. Next, market data reliability. Regulators and policymakers need an ability to rely on market data to ensure that they make the proper decisions and take the proper actions. Similarly, they rely on regulatory reports from market participants to understand the market. Many times, participant data is inaccurate, which then triggers a costly reconciliation process between the regulator and the participant. Blockchains are accurate. By addressing the double spend problem, blockchains ensure that tokens are accurately associated with public addresses. Any data only moves subject to protocol rules. In addition, regulatory reports are often stale. Regulators are receiving outdated information on the basis of periodic reports, sometimes quarterly. Blockchain provides for real-time views. You can have what's known as self-sovereign regulatory oversight. Regulators can run a node, be a market participant, and get their own data directly from the blockchain. Next, sanctions screening and money laundering. Regulators want to ensure that sanctioned individuals don't have access to financial markets. Similarly, they want to ensure that criminals don't have an ability to use financial infrastructure to launder criminal proceeds. Blockchains are transparent. All data associated with the transfer of an asset is traceable back to its genesis. It's important to note that this is an increased benefit over today's financial system, which is many times opaque. Now, there are still questions in the industry on how to deal with pseudonymous transactions, but the benefits of traceability should lead lawmakers to incentivize the industry to create identity solutions which are reasonable and make sense. Next, fairness and competition. Regulators and policymakers want to create a fair market with an even playing field for entrepreneurs to compete. Similarly, they're incentivized to create regulations that deal with creating market stability. Blockchains have mitigated operator dominance. You have tokenomic mechanisms in place to stop overwhelming operator influence from one or a small group of entities. Instead, you have a distributed set of operators. This helps get away from the too big to fail operator monopolies. And lastly, market level decisions. Regulators want to have insights into market level decisions before they happen. There are risks today that exist around single, large-scale entities making arbitrary decisions that have market-wide repercussions. Blockchains provide for transparent decision-making. With on-chain governance, you can provide for the ability to see actions that affect the network before they happen, and then plan accordingly. So shifting gears a little bit, interoperability. So regulators and policymakers are incentivized to create efficiencies in markets, and they do so through the promulgation of standards. There's been a rise in a multitude of networks, layer 1s, layer 2s, and even layer 3s. Interoperability is a means of connecting data silos. It helps stop fragmentation and helps drive cross-chain liquidity. In fact, by working at the programmatic layer of interoperability and at the smart contract layer, regulators can actually create a one-click model to apply standards across connected chains. Again, at the programmatic layer, but not at the base level protocol. So, bringing these two worlds together, I'm here to say that you do not need to sacrifice decentralization for interoperability, and that regulators can actually get all the benefits of decentralization with interoperability. Enter Axelar. Axelar is a public and permissionless blockchain that sits between blockchains. The movement of assets is done by a permissionless set of tokenomic incentivized validators. It has governance mechanisms in place around rewards, slashing, and quadratic voting, which are meant to maintain balanced voting. In addition, Axelar operates as a hub and spoke model. Rather than bilateral connections between networks, a connected network only needs to integrate into Axelar to then have access to all of the other connected networks. So, my last comment. This conference, and I know Paul has been very focused on, privacy. And I think decentralization and privacy actually have a lot in common. They are not the easiest to implement, but you get the maximal benefits when we set both up as targets. So accordingly, to glean the benefits that I've discussed, regulators and policymakers should pass laws and regulations to promote maximum decentralization. Thank you. Oh, and I'm sorry, that's a link to the paper that I mentioned at the front of this. Thank you.
Very important project. Appreciate all your work, Jason. Thanks for giving us an overview. Okay, we have one quick announcement. Gerald, this is going to wrap up our lightning talks. We're going to have a very brief, maybe 5-minute or so break while you guys grab another coffee, and then we're going to come back for the Project Glitch session right after. But a really cool thing is happening tomorrow. It's probably why some of you are here in town. So tell us, please.
Thanks, Paul. Morning, everybody. My name is Gerald Gallagher. I'm one of the co-founders and stewards of DC DAO. We're a city DAO here in Washington, D.C., focused on community innovation and policy. We also host a one-day conference called Crypto Capital, formerly ETHDC, and it is happening tomorrow. So I see a bunch of our panelists, speakers in the room. Very excited to see those of you who are attending tomorrow there. Focused on builders, a little bit less on policy. We will talk about decentralization and all the other fun topics we've been covering today, but should be a little more laid back, a little fewer suits. So hope to see you out there. Have a good one. Thanks.
All right, that wraps up the first half of our meeting. Please grab a cup of coffee if you need it, and come right back in less than 5 minutes, and we will get started on our fireside chat, which is going to be very cool. Hello, hello, hey, come on back to your seats. Let's get started for part 2. Thank you. Come on back. All right, let's get started. So we have a really interesting panel. I already teed it up in the opening, so I'm not going to take any time here. But I'm going to hand over to Mike, and Mike, you'll do the introduction of our special panelists. So this is, I don't know that we haven't done anything like this before. This is a very unique experience that you're all about to have. So please come back and join us and enjoy this panel. It's a very important topic.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Happy PGP. My name is Mike Orcutt. I'm a founding editor of Project Glitch. We're a small team of journalists focused on the future of the internet. Please take a minute to subscribe to our newsletter, projectglitch.xyz. We also curate live event content, including these discussions and the DC Privacy Summit, which we did in October, and we'll be doing again this October 16th, so mark your calendars. I am honored today to introduce our guest, Sam CZ-Sun. Sam is one of the most well-known white hat hackers in crypto, if not the most famous. He spent the past 4 years working at the venture capital firm Paradigm, and recently stepped down from that role to focus full-time on the Security Alliance, SEAL for short, which he founded last year, if I'm not mistaken. Sam is passionate about crypto security, and in particular how to prevent and respond to hacks that we have all seen in the news, including recently. And that's what we're going to be spending the next half hour or so talking about. So thank you very much for being with us, Sam.
Thanks for having me. There's definitely a bit of a delay on this voice changer, so appreciate you bringing up with this.
Yeah, so we'll deal with that. Appreciate it. Let's start by having you fill us in on your professional background. Wondering, how did you get your start in cybersecurity, and what specifically drew you to crypto security?
Yeah, so cybersecurity, like most extremely talented people I know, I got my start in games as a kid. And so for me, it was Minecraft. And specifically, I think if you actually go out there and Google my name, you'll actually find some Minecraft plugins that I worked on in the past. So, back when I was a kid, I was writing all this software, and I had to protect them, right? Because I was selling it for a profit and before trying to steal my work. And that was obviously completely unacceptable. And so that's what led me down the rabbit hole of DRM and software piracy. And that was really all the nudge I needed. From there, I sort of wandered around doing bug bounties, doing web app research, etc., until one day one of my friends pointed me to this Ethereum thing and said, hey, there's this security thing you might be really interested in. And he was talking about the parity multisig hacks. And so I looked at that, and, that just opened a whole can of worms for me. I had to know all about Solidity. I had to know about what happened. Why did, this constructor that shouldn't have been called again, how did it get called again? How did this contract delete itself? And the rest is history.
Great. And you started in crypto at the company Trail of Bits, correct? And
yeah, that's right.
And what did you do there? What was your experience there? And sort of how did that evolve over time and then lead to what you did next?
So Trail of Bits was my first, we can call it like real crypto job. And so, at Trail of Bits, I was doing audits like everyone else. I worked with some really interesting clients, really interesting companies, had a lot of fun, but I think, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and the thing about auditing, even now, is that you can't afford to make any mistakes, right? It's actually one of the biggest reasons I hear for people burning out is because there's just so much pressure on auditors to not make a single mistake at all. It's sort of assumed by the community that once a project has gone through audit, it's sort of infallible. There can be no bugs. And then whenever there is a bug, it sort of becomes this sort of interesting PR game between the project and auditor and the community and whose fault it is. And so that, obviously is a lot of pressure. I personally, could have done without it. In fact, that's partly why I stopped doing it. I know a lot of the auditors are also a little fed up with it. It's one of the things I'm hoping to change about the community through Seal, but that sort of is what happened for me at Chillipits.
Interesting. So in 2020, back in 2020, and this is shortly before you joined Paradigm, if I'm not mistaken, there were a couple of blog posts that were written that in retrospect were really influential. I think towards the path that you ended up taking. One of them was called "Ethereum is a Dark Forest," and it was written by at that time I think your future colleagues at Paradigm, Dan Robinson and Georgios Konstantopoulos, who and the subsequent one was co-authored by yourself, and it was called "Escaping the Dark Forest." And these were highly technical posts that talked about some rescue attempts, and one of which was successful and one of which wasn't. I'm curious. I'm wondering if you can help us understand what it means in practice that Ethereum is a dark forest, or was a dark forest, continues to be a dark forest, and if you can use sort of real life examples, I think that would help.
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you who haven't read the two posts that Mike is referring to, chronologically it goes Ethereum is a dark forest first, followed by Escaping. And in the first post written by Dan and Georgios, the plot is basically, and having been there that night when it happened, Dan and Georgios found some Uniswap, I believe it is V2 back then, LP positions that were sort of left unattended, right? And they were sort of in a position where anyone who had noticed that the LP positions were there in that particular contract could then call a public function to claim the collateral. And so it was sort of a case of money just lying on the ground. As soon as you noticed it was there, you could take it. The person who had accidentally left it there wanted it back. And so they reached out to Dan as one of the co-authors of Uniswap to help get it back. And this is when Dan and Georgios noticed that, because of the way that the Ethereum ecosystem had evolved, there was now this sort of dark forest happening. And of course, the dark forest being a reference to the free body problem. The idea that, we're now in this adversarial environment where it's actually, in a sense, unsafe to, make a noise, because the moment you make that noise, you'll get picked up by the more advanced adversaries watching this environment, right? And in this case, making a noise would be sending a transaction into the public mempool where all of these MEV searchers and MEV bots were watching. And this is really interesting because at that point in time, when Dan and Georgios came to me and mentioned, hey, we have the situation where we have these tokens that can be claimed by anyone, I told them that I remember dealing with a very advanced MEV searcher months earlier that was able to not only scan the mempool and find these transactions that would be profit generating, but in fact, analyze it and dissect it in such a way that this MEV searcher would then send a new transaction into the mempool, front running yours with the exact specific call data needed to replicate what your transaction did, right? It's sort of like, in a very futuristic way, like took apart your transaction, picked out only the important parts, and then created an amalgamation of a new transaction. It was very scary when I first saw it. I fortunately avoided it by blind luck. Dan and Georgios were not as fortunate, but it did make a very interesting blog post. As we then all found out, it became sort of the kicking off for the entire MEV industry. And then Escaping the Dark Forest was a post that I followed up with a few months later, which detailed the lengths that we had to go through in order to ensure a successful rescue in this new environment that we found ourselves in. And so in that, we found a different vulnerability that put a project at risk with around $10 million TVL. And today, $10 million seems like, pennies, but at the time, I assure you, it was a lot of money in a protocol. And knowing what we knew about the Dark Forest, we knew that we had to be really careful. And so we assembled a team of, 5 or 6 people. And not to spoil the entire thing, you should definitely read it if you haven't. But the journey took us from discovering the exploit all the way to contacting like a single miner. Back then, we were also proof of work. Contacting a single miner out in Asia who then gave us a private API into their mining network that let us send a transaction directly to their nodes to be included in the blocks they would mine without it going into the public mempool. And so definitely, again, highly recommend both block posts, but just goes to show at the time how difficult it was to keep your transactions private because there were so many of these meth searchers who were ready to jump on any opportunity to make a profit.
And shortly after that, you joined Paradigm. And can you tell us a bit about your experience there, what you learned during that time, and how that stuff helped inspire you to found Seal?
Yeah, so when I joined Paradigm, it was... Well, I should back up first. For those who don't know, Paradigm is a crypto VC, one of the top, 1 to 2, maybe 3 crypto VCs out there, both in terms of reputation, I think, as well as in terms of AUM. And so when I joined Paradigm, there was no specific mandate. There was no role that I was filling. Like everyone else on the research team, the idea was just that here's someone who's really talented in their own field. Dan is extremely talented at AMM design. Gabe is extremely talented at all sorts of mechanisms. Georgios is just a brilliant technologist. And so when I joined the team, the theory was, okay, well, you're really good at security, so let's go do some stuff that's good for the ecosystem that is aligned with the skill set. And so for the first year or so, I sort of did audits for the portfolio. And then I created Paradigm CTF, which I saw filling a need of having actually good security competitions in crypto. But what I realized was that, well, for starters, when I got into crypto, being a really good security researcher was a really strong edge. And by the time that I was 1 or 2 years into Paradigm, that was no longer a very strong edge. It had sort of become commoditized by all the other very talented security researchers also entering crypto. The other thing I realized was that I wanted to really be doing something more with my time than solving these one-off problems, right? Conceptually, doing these audits was sort of like putting in 1 unit of work and getting out 1 unit of work. And what I wanted to do was figure out how I could leverage up on that, like any good VC. And so putting the 2 and 2 together, what I realized was the thing that I was most suited for in the moment, the best thing I could do for the community, was to take my new edge, which was the reputation I'd built in the space, and use that to coordinate new security efforts, right? In a way where, sometimes all the activation energy you need is not a good idea, it's actually someone to advocate for that good idea, right? And I realized that with the reputation I built up, I could be that advocate and I could help get things moving in a much more effective way. And that would also be the way that I could multiply my output, putting in 1 unit of work and getting out, dozens of units of work from all the people that I'm helping organize.
Something I meant to ask you in the beginning of this conversation, and I'll ask you now before we get into Seal, is I think the audience has noticed by now that I'm speaking with an avatar, and his voice is modified. The question is simply, why do you keep your true identity secret?
Yeah, so this one is very personal for me. When I was younger, of all the things to get this privacy journey started on, it was one of those like online safety classes I took at school. And this one really stuck with me. The teacher said something like, how many friends do you have on Facebook? And all my classmates said, oh, I have 500 plus friends. I have so many friends. I think my teacher said something like, well, those aren't actually your friends. They're your acquaintances. And it was like this very cheesy one-liner, but it was that coupled with the idea that like the internet never forgets, that really stuck with me. And I think literally that very same day I went home and I did like a mass purging of my Facebook friends list. It was very heartbreaking for all of my acquaintances. I went through all of the stuff I posted online, filtered out all the stuff that I didn't want the internet remembering forever. And that principle has lived with me to this day. I think it, over time, it might have ratcheted up a little higher than was reasonable, but I think the ratchet is like a very good analogy for online privacy because once you put something on the internet, especially today, it's very hard to go back, right? Once you de-anonymize your voice or your identity or any details about you, in today's world, it's almost impossible to undo that. And so for me, I'd rather not take the chance, especially now that I'm dealing with, anywhere from another future cybersecurity expert to nation states. The thought that the me of today might be putting something on the internet that the me of 5 years would seriously regret, is a little heartbreaking, and I'd rather not go through that process. It's also very surprising for those who haven't really thought about this. Like, the information that you put on the internet doesn't have to be specific for it to be useful, right? I mean, you could just imagine saying something as innocent as like, "Oh man, the weather here is really bad today." But that could narrow it down pretty specifically, like a handful of cities in the U.S. If, for example, someone knows that you're typically within the U.S., right? Like, you could check the weather reports, you could determine which cities had, very bad thunderstorms or very bad weather at the moment that you sent the message. If you send a picture of some funny street sign, like people play GeoGuessr and they identify the exact location of photos, right? If you send a really funny poster that's temporary, right? That could have an area code in it, that could have some phrase that's easily searchable. And so it turns out if you want to have good online privacy and you don't want to reveal personal details, you actually end up not being able to talk about a lot of things. And so it's definitely a bit of a trade-off. But for me, with the kind of work that I do, better safe than sorry.
Thank you for that. That's a great explanation. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially with the rise of LLMs. Okay, so moving on to SEAL. What is SEAL? What is the state of it today? I know that it's multifaceted and that sharing information about threats is a big component. What are the other components and how do they work together?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, SEAL stands for the Security Alliance. We took that name. Now there can be no more security alliances. There's only this one. And what we do is we run what we call initiatives for the cryptocurrency space. And so each initiative, we try to solve a specific problem that we have identified. We try to create a solution that, ideally does not rely on charging, exorbitant amount of money for it. Ideally, it sort of is accessible to the average user and, ideally solves a problem. And so one of our most well-known initiatives that we operate today is SEAL 911. This is our emergency hotline for people who have been victims of some cybersecurity incident. In practice, what this looks like is, whether you're a project that just got hacked or you're a user that just lost a bunch of money, the best cybersecurity researchers in crypto are just 1 Telegram message away, right? And once you message us, we can triage what your problem is. We can connect you with all the right people. This is historically something that's been very talenting. You either knew the auditors and you knew the protocols and you knew, who to message, or you didn't. And if you didn't, then you were out of luck. But today with SEAL 911, as long as you have an urgent situation that we've triaged as, highly time sensitive, we can make all the sections that you need. And that's been really helpful. The beauty of SEAL 911 is that it also gives us insight into what's affecting crypto users today. So instead of having to speculate on what the latest problems are or the latest trends are, we have the data, right? And so it's through this data that, for example, we've observed that when we first launched SEAL, smart contract attacks were sort of the bread and butter of cyber criminals, right? They were almost every ticket that we got was a smart contract hack. And today, that could not be farther from the truth. We do still get the occasional hack ticket, but more often than not, it's some person who's lost their life savings in some trainer or some investment scam or some other user-related scam, right? And so this sort of data is really valuable to us, and it helps us build on our other initiatives. And so I can give a quick run through of the other ones. And then, of course, hand the mic back to you. We have Seal War Games, which is our like red teaming initiative to help prepare projects. We have Seal Intel, which, as you mentioned, is our intelligence sharing effort. All of this is, fed by Zone ML1, which is another key point. It's just we have all of this interconnectivity across our initiatives. Everything builds on one another. We have Seal Eclipse, which is aiming to solve the user safety portion of crypto security. So, we collaborate with law enforcement, we collaborate with other infra partners to take down these scams where possible. We have SEAL Frameworks, which is our attempt at writing sort of the new safety standards, security status for crypto security. And we have something that we're working on, we're hoping to get published in the next quarter or two. And we're really excited about this one. We're going to launch a certification framework for crypto security built on top of SEAL Frameworks itself, which will hopefully bring some standardization to how users and security providers and protocols all interact with each other as far as, signaling this trust and as far as establishing best practices go.
I think one of the most interesting things that SEAL has pioneered is called a safe harbor agreement for white hat hackers. Can you explain what that is and how it works and why it's necessary?
Yeah, for sure. So for those who aren't familiar, the safe harbor agreement for white hats is our attempt at trading a legal framework for conducting what are now known as white hat rescues. And the reason why we need this is really simple, is because crypto is the only space where, in fact, not only do others see your company getting hacked in real time, but sometimes, they might actually find out you're getting hacked before you are if you haven't set up the proper monitoring. And I don't think this is true for any other industry. It's certainly not true for tech as we knew it. In the sense that, some of these large tech companies get compromised and we don't find out for years, right? It's only when they're forced to, they absolutely have to, that it gets this close somewhere. And so in crypto, where everything happens in real time, where there's maximum transparency, it turns out people can see what's happening. And it also turns out that people can sometimes actually help because, once something is on the blockchain, it's publicly accessible, right? As we talked about, there are these mess searchers that can intercept transactions. They've developed the technology to analyze this large volume of penny transactions in real time and determine which transaction generates a profit and which doesn't. Well, hacked transactions generate a profit, right? They just generate a profit for the attacker. And so what we notice is time and time again, when these hacks are happening, there's always some person out there who has the infrastructure and has the technology to analyze what would have been a hacked transaction, determine that it was malicious, possibly front-run it themselves, and then intercept the funds and return them to the rightful owner, except there was no legal framework under which they felt comfortable in doing that, right? The canonical example that we always point to, the one that really inspired us specifically, is the Nomad bridge hack, where this one was actually extremely painful. We watched for, 2 or 3 hours, maybe longer, as just regular people even, there were write-ups about this afterwards, just regular people saw the hack happening, copied the payload, put their own address in there, and took a bit of the funds away, because the regular people didn't care about the CFAA or whatever. They just saw there was some money that could be taken, whereas all the experts in the room knew about the legal implications, knew about the risks involved, and personally didn't feel comfortable in taking that risk, right? And so we developed the safe harbor agreement to try to bring a framework in place here that could allow the white hat hackers and web searchers, anyone who was interested in doing the right thing, who knew about all the layers of legalities involved, to clear the path for them so that they can do the right thing and they can rescue these funds as, sort of the defenders of last resort when everything else had failed.
Very interesting. Okay, so I want to talk about Lazarus, which probably most people in the room know is an infamous nation-state level hacking group from North Korea, and has been in the headlines recently in the wake of the Bybit hack, which was an enormous amount of money, over $1 billion. what can you tell us, first of all, about the role that SEAL has been able to play in response to that hack?
Yeah, so like everyone else in crypto, the Bybit hack, we saw it basically immediately. I mean, it's very hard to not see $1 billion moving out of a crypto exchange's wallet. It sort of sets off red flags everywhere. But as soon as we confirmed with the team that this was not intentional, and we were able to do that through all the hotlines that we've set up with Store 911, we were quickly able to jump on the case and start mapping out where the funds were going and to send those addresses out to exchanges and other partners that we work with who, could then put a label on those transactions. We were also able to help try to pinpoint where the compromise happened. Although, as it turns out, our pattern matching completely failed us in this case, because what has happened so many times in the past is that Lazarus would target an exchange directly. They would compromise an employee at the exchange. They would infect the computer and then, inject themselves into the daily operations. Right? We've actually seen this play out numerous times with a bunch of exchanges out in the East. Ones that before they got compromised, I'd never even heard of. But in this case, that actually turned out to be the wrong assumption. Because as we were in contact with Bybit, we were also in contact with Safe. And, over time, we found out through Safe that what had actually happened was one of their developers were compromised, right, in a supply chain attack. And so then we were able to point then to the right resources, in this case, Mandians. We were able to make that connection to help them get proper forensics done as soon as possible. We helped them with the disclosure process. So really going through the entire workflow from discovering the incident all the way to helping wrap things up at the very end. It's something that SEAL, whether through Store 911 or through the rest of our membership, was actively involved in.
Lazarus is not only a threat to DeFi and crypto, but is a national security threat to the United States and as well as other governments. In January, the governments of the U.S., Japan, and South Korea issued a joint statement warning the blockchain technology industry about North Korea's cyber program, which they said threatens our three countries and the broader international community. It called for deeper collaboration between public and private sectors to counter this threat, and it name dropped SEAL in the statement. In your view, what are the ways that SEAL can help governments in their efforts to protect financial infrastructure against Lazarus?
So the biggest way that we've been able to help so far is to basically be this bridge between Web 2 and Web 3, right? In Web 2, you have a handful of big players. They're almost certainly happy to set up direct connections with the government themselves, if not, having very obvious points of contact, either on LinkedIn or over email or where have you. The same could not be less true for crypto, where, as we're all very familiar with, a lot of the actors in crypto are not interested at all in communicating with any government. A lot of the actors in crypto don't use LinkedIn. They don't have an email. You can either reach them through Twitter DMs or Telegram, or, you can just not talk to them, right? And so there's definitely a bit of a gap between where the government's ability to basically reach out to these crypto actors end and where our ability to navigate this new environment begins. And this is really important because, as we found out last year, there's actually a specific unit within the FBI that's solely dedicated to Lazarus, right, to North Korean cyber operations. And so they've been diligently working behind the scenes, tracking Lazarus as they move through computer systems worldwide, identifying victims through traces that Lazarus leaves behind, and notifying these victims, ideally before they actually get compromised during the reconnaissance phase, right? And this works really well in Web 2, and it doesn't work as well in Web 3, again, because of that communications gap. And so that's really been the place that we've been able to have the most impact, is to coordinate with this particular unit and to help them make connections with people in crypto that are pretty hard to reach because they're only on Telegram, or because they don't respond to feds or government people without a very good reason or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, super interesting, what's going on behind the scenes. Couple more questions, and we'll wrap this up. The title of this discussion is The Developing State of Crypto Incident Response. Is it fair to say that SEAL and the field of crypto security incident response generally is a work in progress? And what still needs to be done if that's the case? What are the most urgent priorities?
I would say, like all things in security, it's definitely a work in progress. That's not to say that we haven't made progress. It's to say that, security is not a solved game and never will be. And so on one hand, part of the reason we've launched SEAL 911, to take you back a brief moment, is during a particularly scary incident. This is the Viper 0 day. We found a bug in the Viper compiler that put a handful of curve pools at risk, right? And although the actual magnitude or the scope of the vulnerability was small compared to, say, a Solidity compiler bug, it was still extremely scary in the sense that it was a compiler bug, right? And that's something you basically never want to hear. What was really noteworthy about this incident is that for the first 3 or 4 hours, we basically had like 3 separate war rooms happening in parallel. Different white hats noticed that this hack had occurred, root caused to the compiler, and it spun up their own little war rooms to try to triage and notify the affected projects. But what we really needed was just one point of contact in one place where people could coordinate, because that would have saved so much wasted effort that people spent basically deducing the same information. And so from that sense, today we have SEAL 911, and we're able to really easily deduplicate war room efforts, right? Like multiple people might reach out to us to notify us about a particular hack, and we could tell them, hey, thanks for letting us know. Actually, the first person who let us know 3 hours ago, we already spun a whole war room because of that, right? We don't have to go through all this wasted effort. We set up all these hotlines, as I alluded to. So between some of the biggest protocols and exchanges in crypto now, we have direct connections with, where the understanding is if we message you in this particular group chat, it means something seriously bad has happened and like you need to respond immediately. It sort of sets expectations around response times through that particular medium. So, we know that it's very high priority. So in that sense, we've already made a lot of progress in incident response. On the flip side, can we make more progress? Of course. Yeah, as I alluded to in the Bybit hack, like there's still a lot of manual effort involved in transmitting these flag addresses, right? You might have saw that Bybit themselves launched an API at a website for cooperative exchanges and instant exchanges to basically pull addresses from and action at their at their own discretion. But the fact that Bybit had set something up like that is because there's just no infrastructure for that in the moment. And so automating that workflow and, just in general facilitating more efficient information sharing is something I think we need to really solve in the next, ideally in the next year. And that's something that, we're hoping we will solve through initiatives like SEAL Intel and SEAL 911.
In that vein, what would you like more policymakers here in DC and other capitals around the world to understand about the state of crypto security, the state of incident response, and the potential role of SEAL?
Well, I think maybe the first message is just that, despite the numbers on the wall, which, look pretty bad, I'm not going to lie. The fact of the matter is, we have been improving over the years. We've been improving, I think, at a much higher rate now than we have been previously. And so, the first is just like, it's not all doom and gloom out there, right? There's people like myself, like everyone else at SEAL, who are genuinely interested and have been putting in the time, I've seen it with my own 2 eyes, into making the space safer, not just for the scammers, but more importantly for the users, right? Obviously, we can't discriminate who is using crypto, but we can make it safer for everyone involved. I think the next big message is just, not that DC hasn't seen a person named Sam come in and promise to solve all crypto's problems, but I would love for SEAL to work closer with policymakers and with people who are interested in trying to make the space better, right? I think the point of SEAL is one to foster collaboration within the industry, right? We have a lot of people who are working in security, and the point is to coordinate all of that effort so that we're all moving in the same direction and not sort of pulling in opposite directions. But the second mission is to basically create a bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. We think that we have the membership and we have the diversity in opinions to represent what crypto security is thinking at any given moment. And we're interested in collaborating with as many people as possible in order to help our initiatives grow and succeed, which will help the space become more secure. And so if there is anyone in DC that is interested in helping us with this mission, is interested in meeting and chatting, we would love to, either to help unlock progress or just to be the technical voice in the room. That's the role we play with some of these law enforcement agencies, right? Is they've identified some crypto crime, but they're not really sure what specifically is happening, or they need some help to analyze a particular, hack payload or anything like that. And that, again, is something we can provide value in. And so, I guess, to summarize, basically, we're here and we're willing to help and we're excited to chat. And so, let's chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sam, for taking the time. We know you're extremely busy. And thanks for everyone for coming today. It's been great.
Oh, there we go. We're on. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Mike. From now on, I don't know about you, but whenever I think of SEAL and crypto security, I'm going to think of this room of animated characters, superhero, white hat hackers that are saving the internet. So it's so cool. It's never going to go away. I'm going to have that image in my mind. We'll see you next month. Thank you all. Please go to Crypto Capital tomorrow, ETH DC, and enjoy this beautiful weather. Have a great day. Take care.